Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Contour Community Meeting. Today is August 11th, 2020. We have just a few things that we want to go through today. So let me share my screen and let's go over them. So, Steve, you have a topic here.
Yeah. So I think 2 weeks ago in the community meeting, I mentioned that I was working on adding some controls for enabling a kind of a contour administrator to set a min and max for some of the different timeout settings that we were adding. And the thinking there was that, a central contour admin might want to limit, say, the max timeout range that a user could put on a proxy so that they couldn't just set infinite timeouts for all the different settings. And originally we were thinking about just adding these as new fields into the contour config file. But we discussed it some more and thought that might not be the best approach to it for a number of different reasons, and also got some feedback from some users. And so as coming out of that, I started looking into some other options, particularly around using admission control. And James Peach recommended looking at Gatekeeper, which is related to the OPA project, the Open Policy Agent project, and basically gives you a validating admission controller where you can define OPA policies to enforce kind of whatever policy you want. So anyway, long story short, I've been spending the last couple of days starting to look into this. I don't have any experience with it, so part of it is me just getting up to speed on it, and also starting to play around to see if this is something that we could sort of integrate with Contour and think about what sorts of policies we would want to actually put into Gatekeeper. Early impressions are that I do think it definitely could be useful. I can definitely see how some of the things that we would want to enforce could be pretty easily expressed as policies. And from my playing around with it, it's relatively simple to get going, especially if someone else is kind of writing the policies or the constraints for you, and all you really have to do is apply them with your the specific parameters you want. But I don't know if we want to make it a kind of a required part of the Contour stack. I'm thinking we might want to position it more as sort of an optional thing where if users are interested in using it, they can. But if for whatever reason they don't want to deploy it into their cluster, Contour still works fine and still has some validation for things that aren't exposed through Gatekeeper.
I think we do have a lot of people using OPA or OPA already. So I'm wondering if we could, so this is kind of separate from that project, but still utilizing the policies. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it uses OPA kind of as the engine. So Gatekeeper specifically refers to deploying it as a Kubernetes validating admission controller.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of just deploying it in a particular context, and there's a kind of a CRD model that enables you to define your policies and your validations. So I think for anyone who's already using OPA, it's a pretty natural extension, and odds are if they're using it in Kubernetes, they may already have Gatekeeper deployed anyway.
Mm-hmm. So for this, I'm just thinking of a deployment scenario for this. You would first deploy Gatekeeper, apply the correct policies, and then deploy Contour, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't be able to call on Gatekeeper and the policies when you start up Contour.
Right. I mean, you could deploy it after you already have a running Contour instance. And what will happen is any new proxies that are configured will essentially get run through your Gatekeeper policies. And then Gatekeeper also has an audit functionality, so it will periodically look at all of the existing resources in the cluster that match your policies and tell you whether they sort of pass or fail according to the policies. But Gatekeeper won't kick them out of the cluster or make them invalid in any way. It'll let you know, hey, you're out of you're violating the policy.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That makes it a little easier then to because then you don't need to have a complete greenfield deployment of Contour.
Right.
That makes it easier.
And that was definitely one of the major concerns that was raised around kind of embedding this kind of policy information directly into Contour, is that it made it more difficult to start adding policy without having all, potentially having existing proxies get broken by rolling out a new policy if they violated it. And Gatekeeper makes that pretty easy.
So what's the main reason for not going with a configuration file? Is it because you can set certain settings wrong, or what's the main reason?
I mean, if we just expose some things through a config file, I think we would end up having to build a fair amount of the functionality that something like Gatekeeper already exposes into Contour directly. I think we would want something similar to that audit functionality where we could flag things without marking them invalid. The other issue is that, if we're adding things directly to a config file, then every new policy check that we want to add needs to be programmed into Contour. Whereas with Gatekeeper and OPA, end users can write whatever additional policies they want. I think we'd probably have a recommended set from Contour that we would suggest that you install, but it would be completely extensible for users to add their own without having to submit pull requests to Contour and wait for releases and that kind of thing. So a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, that would make it a lot easier for people, as you say, then to do their own custom valid settings, so to speak.
Yep.
Cool. So for people on the call, are you using OPA, OPA, or Gatekeeper right now?
No.
Yes, we are.
Okay, cool. So would this be useful?
So I joined a couple of minutes late, but it sounds like you're looking to integrate Gatekeeper with Contour.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, so yes, I think this could be useful, but I guess my question is this different from the external authorization design that you did? Because in theory, the external auth capability you're building can talk to OPA over gRPC, right? This would be a different integration.
I think this would be different. So I think we would use Gatekeeper as an admission controller for new HTTP proxies and basically use it for validating that the proxy configuration meets your policy. And so it could be a mix of validating things like every proxy has a unique FQDN. It could be enforcing minimum and maximum values for some of the settings, for some of the timeout settings, et cetera.
So yeah, I think this would be useful. There's a couple of specific use cases for us. One is we think we want to disable people being able to set infinite, for example, on timeouts. And the way that Contour implements that with the word infinite has always bugged me. It's like, this seems like the only project that instead of treating 0.s as infinite, treats 0.s as nothing, and the word infinite is infinite. But anyway, aside from that, we think we want to disable
the infinite emoji instead as a setting.
But we're interested in like blocking stuff like infinite. We're actually thinking about writing an OPA policy for that already. And then the other one too is, and we were thinking maybe the external authorization provider here is, we want to prevent what we're sort of calling crosstalks. So we've got two sets of contours. One is like for PCI workloads. We want to basically look at the source IP of the request to say that only these contours this contour can only accept traffic from this sort of source IP type stuff. So we've got a couple of use cases where we think OPA and external auth and or Gatekeeper would be useful.
Cool. Thank
And
you.
we're moving everything from, when I say everything, we've got a ton of OPA right now, but we're migrating that stuff across to Gatekeeper for all the, the benefits that Gatekeeper brings.
Oh, you're moving from OPA to Gatekeeper?
Yeah, we've got a bunch of OPA right now,
Mm-hmm.
but we're migrating a lot of that stuff out of sort of mutating webhooks into more of a Gatekeeper service. So it's the same rules. We're just migrating how we run them. I'm not super close to it. We've got a guy on our team that's doing a lot of that work, but we're basically suffering from sort of OPA sprawl right now. And so there are some benefits that I can't articulate super well. There's some benefits around using Gatekeeper versus just raw OPA from, I believe, a management point of view and these sort of things.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing, and I've only been playing with Gatekeeper for a couple of days, but kind of all of your constraints and your constraint templates and constraints are exposed as custom resource definitions within your cluster, so you can sort of access them in a very Kubernetes native way, which is probably helpful for management.
Actually, one of the things, I'm just recalling back on our internal meetings, one of the things that I think that we get away from is having to write sort of small validating webhook code in Go. So we've been doing these little snippets of Go code, and we want to get out of that game too. Just not having, and we don't need those when we go to Gatekeeper, apparently. So we get out of the business of writing that code and then having to maintain the code in terms of Go versions and depths and all that sort of stuff. So that's another win, I think.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Awesome. Good discussions. Anything else you want to add here, Steve or Michael?
No. I mean, I think the next steps are going to be to talk this over some more with the other maintainers. I haven't really had a chance to talk about that with others much yet, but we'll sort of figure out, based on what I've seen so far, if there are additional areas we need to explore, and then figure out sort of how to proceed. So more to come. Just wanted to kind of raise what I've done so far.
Sounds good. Does anyone have any discussion topics that they would like to talk about today? Anything you're wondering, anything that Steve can answer?
Put a link to an issue in the chat window that I was hoping to discuss today, but I have a feeling that I need James and Nick on the call to discuss. And this is about proceeding with the service APIs implementation. So yeah, just trying to move this forward. As Nick laid out in his most recent comment, we need to start enumerating work that needs to be done in preparation for implementing service APIs, and then the actual service APIs implementation specific work. So I guess my question would be is, I'm not familiar with HackMD. How do I make sure that this discussion is identified in the next week's meeting that I believe is Australia friendly?
So you can just log in with your GitHub account on HackMD and add in a line under next week and add what you want to talk about next week.
I can only leave a comment.
This is open to everyone. Everyone can join in and edit. And of course, we do audits every now and then to make sure that the edits are correct. But yeah, it's open for everyone.
I similarly found like it's not intuitive on how to turn on edit mode in HackMD. I think I finally worked it out, but
yeah, it's over here, so
over
you can
here,
add
right.
in edit and view mode.
Yes, that's
it.
Or just edit mode if you want that.
I'm with whoever the person trying to work this out is. I was the same. I'm like, how do I edit this thing?
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I'm logged in, and okay, cool. Now I know how to edit. So
it's unlike Google Docs. Like, there's no WYSIWYG, which is sort of what I was originally stuck on. But yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So just add your stuff in here, and then we'll bring it up on next week's call.
When is the date usually posted in this document for like the next meeting? Is that done after this call, or is it done
Yeah,
shortly
after.
before? Okay, all right, then I'll keep an eye out on it. So thanks for the direction.
Yeah, sure thing. Any other questions, comments?
No, I just one comment, the long running saga of our non-SNI clients, in particular the IBM Data Power Gateway. So the team have successfully tested that after we got the 1.7. So that's a big win for us. So thanks for persisting with that.
Great, that's good to hear.
Awesome. Well, then with that, we're going to end today's call, and hope you all have a fantastic rest of the week, and see you all next week.
All right,
Have a good
thanks.
one, folks. Bye.